Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be tackling something that's really essential, I think, for life in Abu Dhabi, and that is its water and electricity sector.
Sounds important.
Yeah, it is. And the way we're going to approach this is by using the 2019 statistical report from the Emirates Water and Electricity Company.
EWEC.
The EWEC, that's right. And using this report, we're going to kind of go through and just see what's in there.
Yeah, so this report, it's published annually by EDWEC, and as it mentions in the report itself, EDWEC was established in 2018, succeeding ADWEC, and so they have the responsibility of, annually publishing this report.
Okay, well, that sounds like a good place to start. So this deep dive is essentially going to extract, I think, the most important information from the 2019 report as it pertains to things like how much electricity and water was in demand and how much was being produced,
Right.
what were the fuels that were being used to produce the electricity, and what was the capacity going forward.
Right. And the report itself is structured quite helpfully. It has sections on electricity statistics, water statistics, fuel statistics, capacity statistics, and a section on CO2 emissions, and finally forecast statistics.
Okay, so all the bases are covered then.
Yeah.
Great. Well, our mission for this deep dive is really to try to leave you with a good understanding of the state of power and water in Abu Dhabi in 2019 and some of the trends that were apparent at that time.
Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah. Let's start with electricity, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so when we look at the electricity sector, one of the things that stands out, I think, in the report is the role of EWEC. So they seem to act as a sort of guarantor of the security of supply, balancing supply and demand through these long-term agreements with production companies and distribution companies.
Yes, that's right. So they're not, the sole owners of all the assets, but they're essentially the ones that make sure that electricity supply is secure and reliable, and they do this through long-term agreements with the independent power producers and the distribution companies.
Okay, so essentially they conduct the electricity orchestra, so to speak.
Right.
And just to give our listeners a feel for what the system looks like, the report gives us a snapshot of what the electricity system network looked like as of summer 2020. So this is just a couple years after this 2019 report.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty vast system. It's got 400 kilovolt circuits. It's got 220 kilovolt circuits. It's got 132 kilovolt circuits.
Right.
And it breaks it down geographically into the Abu Dhabi region, which includes, Abu Dhabi Island itself, Industrial City, Sadia Island, Yas Island. It's got the Al Ain region, and it's got the Al Dhafra region.
Correct. And it also mentions the separate electricity networks operated by ADNOC and EGA, and also talks about the interconnection points between their network and EWEC's main grid.
Okay, interesting. So there's a big industrial component to this network as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive into the historical demand a little bit. And one of the first things that the report looks at is the system's weekly electricity peaks. And it looks at these from 2010 to 2019. What kind of a trend do we see there?
Yeah, so there's a general trend of increasing weekly peak demands over that period.
Oh.
So, natural ups and downs week on week, likely driven by seasonality, industrial activity. But the general direction is upwards.
Okay, so increasing demand over that period. And now let's zoom out a little bit and look at the global Abu Dhabi system peak and minimum demands. And it looks at these from 1999 to 2019. So a couple of decades there. What jumps out at you?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, the sheer growth in peak demands over that 20-year period really underscores the rapid development and economic expansion of the region.
Right.
The second point is that the annual average of minimum demand as a ratio of the peak demand was around 6.6% for the entire period.
6.6%. So that's a tiny fraction of the peak demand.
Exactly.
So that must present a real challenge for the people managing the system.
Absolutely. It's significant variability.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when you look at the period 2008 to 2019, that number increases slightly to 7.9%, which perhaps suggests that while peak demand is still increasing, the general baseline level of electricity demand is also increasing.
Okay. So it's becoming a little bit more stable then.
Slightly, yeah.
Now, the report also gives us the ratio of system electricity minimum to peak demands. And this is on a year-by-year basis. And it looks at it from 1999 to 2019. Were there any years where there was a particularly wide or narrow gap, and what might that have indicated?
So if you look at the yearly figures, you'll see some fluctuation. For example, in 1999, the minimum demand was about 30.8% of the peak by 2019. That had risen to around 34.7%. So this gradual increase might reinforce the idea that overall electricity usage is becoming relatively more stable.
Right.
Compared to those high peaks, it could point to factors like increased air conditioning usage becoming more prevalent even outside the hottest months,
Right.
or growth in sectors with constant energy needs.
Okay, so now the report discusses the 2019 system load duration curves, and it uses February and June as examples of this. Could you explain what these curves tell us?
Sure. So a load duration curve essentially shows you, for any given level of demand, what percentage of the time that demand was met or exceeded.
Okay.
By looking at February and June, which represent different seasons with different energy needs, we can see how the pattern of electricity use changes.
Yeah.
So, for instance, June will likely show a longer period where demand is at a higher level
Right.
due to cooling needs.
Okay, so if we were looking at a graph of this, the June graph would be at a higher point for a longer period.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. And then the report looks at the Abu Dhabi's 2019 system electricity demand profiles.
Yeah.
And it contrasts the maximum and minimum months, and they look at January and August for that. What does that comparison reveal?
Yeah, so the profiles for January and August really underscore the dramatic impact of the summer heat. The August profile shows a significantly higher baseline demand throughout the entire day,
Right.
with a very pronounced spike in the afternoon, almost certainly driven by air conditioning.
Right.
In contrast, the January profile shows a much lower overall demand and a less sharp peak, indicating different usage patterns when cooling requirements are minimal.
Yeah, it's really striking when you look at those two graphs, and you can just see how much higher that August graph is.
Absolutely.
Now let's get into some of the raw numbers here. The report gives us the peak annual demand in gross megawatts, and this is for the Abu Dhabi region, the Al Ain region, the Al Dhafra region, the system as a whole, and then
Yeah.
globally, which includes exports. It looks at this from 1999 to 2019. What kind of trend do we see there?
Yeah, so across all the regions, you see consistent upward trajectory and peak annual demand during that period.
Okay.
And the report calculates the average growth rate was 6.6% per year for the entire system for the period 1999 to 2019.
Okay, so 6.6% per year growth.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about the minimum annual demand over that same period, 1999 to 2019? Was the growth rate there similar?
Yeah, so interestingly, the minimum annual demand shows a slightly higher average growth rate of 9.8% per year for the system. From 1999 to 2019, this reinforces what we were discussing earlier about the baseline level of electricity consumption increasing at a faster pace
Right.
than those absolute peaks.
So the lowest demand is also going up.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. And the report also notes the dates on which these peak annual demands were recorded. Did the peaks tend to occur at any particular time of year?
Yes, so for the system overall, the vast majority of annual peak demands between 1999 and 2019 occurred during the summer months,
Okay.
predominantly between July and September.
Right.
So this strongly correlates with the intense need for cooling during the hottest parts of the year.
Okay, that makes sense.
There are a few exceptions, but summer peak is definitely the dominant pattern.
Okay, great. And what about the dates when the minimum annual demand was recorded? Was there any particular time of year when that tended to happen?
Yeah, so these typically occurred in the cooler months, often in January or February. And if you look at the time of day, it's usually recorded in the very early morning hours, generally between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. when most people are sleeping, and industrial activity is at its lowest.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the monthly data. The report gives us an overview of peak monthly demand from 2015 to 2019 for the Abu Dhabi region, the Al Ain region, the Al Dhafra region, the system, and globally, what seasonal trends do we see there?
Yeah. So when you examine the monthly figures, the seasonal variations become even more pronounced.
Okay.
Across all regions, Abu Dhabi, Al Dhafra,
Yeah.
and the entire system, you consistently see the highest peak demands occurring in the heart of summer, so June, July, August, and sometimes September.
Right.
Conversely, the lowest peak demands are generally observed in the cooler months,
Makes sense.
particularly January and February.
Okay, and what about the minimum monthly demand from 2015 to 2019? Does that largely follow the opposite pattern?
Yes, so minimum monthly demands typically hit their lowest points in January and February.
Okay.
Aligning with the cooler weather and reduced overall activity, you see a gradual increase as you move into the warmer months, with slightly higher minimums in the summer compared to those winter lows.
Okay, and now the report looks at the ratio of monthly peak demand to the annual peak demand for each of the regions. Let's start with the Abu Dhabi region. What does that tell us about the Abu Dhabi region from 2009 to 2019?
So by examining these ratios, we can see which months consistently experience demand levels that come closest to the absolute maximum demand for the entire year. So for the Abu Dhabi region, the ratios for July and August are typically the highest,
Okay.
often hovering around 95 to 100% of the annual peak.
Wow.
So this really emphasizes those months as the months of most intense electricity demand.
Right.
Unsurprisingly, the lowest ratios tend to be in January and February.
Okay, great. And what about the Al-Ain region? Do we see a similar pattern there?
Yeah, very similar pattern. Highest ratios of monthly peak to annual peak occur in the summer months.
Okay.
Although sometimes June also shows a very high ratio. Again, January and February tend to have the lowest ratios,
Okay.
indicating the lowest demand relative to the year's maximum.
Right.
The consistency suggests that the drivers of peak demand are similar across these main urban centers.
Okay. And what about the Al-Dhafra region? Does that show a noticeably different pattern?
So it also follows that summer peak trend.
Yeah, okay.
But there might be slightly more variability in which specific summer month has the absolute highest ratio compared to Abu Dhabi and Al Ain.
Okay.
Factors like the operational schedules of large industrial facilities
Right.
could have a more pronounced impact on the peak demand in this region.
Okay.
However, the general pattern of summer highs and winter lows still holds.
Okay. And finally, what about the system as a whole? What does that monthly peak to annual peak ratio tell us?
Yeah, so for the entire Abu Dhabi system, peak demand is overwhelmingly concentrated in the summer months, with July and August consistently showing ratios very close to or at 100% of the annual peak. So this really underscores the significant impact that summer cooling needs have on the overall electricity demand across the entire emirate.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good feel for the demand side of things now.
Yeah.
Let's look at the energy consumption side, and the report gives us the annual energy demand in gross gigawatt hours. This is for Abu Dhabi, the Al Ain region, Al Dhafra, the system globally, including exports to the Northern Emirates and the GCC.
Right.
And it looks at this from 1999 to 2019.
Right.
What kind of trends do we see there?
Yeah, so the annual energy demand shows consistent and significant growth trend across all categories over that two-decade period. For Abu Dhabi itself, the average annual growth rate was around 6.1%. The global figure, which includes those exports, showed a slightly lower average growth rate of 4.6%, suggesting that while Abu Dhabi's internal consumption grew substantially, the volume of exports also played a role in the overall picture. The system as a whole saw an average annual growth of 6.3%.
Okay, and how is that total energy consumption distributed throughout the year? The report gives us the monthly energy demand from 2015 to 2019.
Yes, and so the monthly energy demand figures clearly illustrate those seasonal variations.
Okay.
We've been discussing, you see a pronounced increase in energy consumption during the summer months, typically peaking in July or August,
Right.
and a corresponding dip in consumption during the cooler winter months. This pattern is consistent across Abu Dhabi Al Dhafra and the entire system,
Okay.
reinforcing the strong link between weather and energy use.
Okay, great. And now, similar to peak demand, the report also analyzes the ratio of monthly energy demand to the annual peak energy demand.
Let's look at the Abu Dhabi region first. What does this tell us about the Abu Dhabi region from 2009 to 2019?
So by looking at these ratios, we can gauge how the total energy consumed in any given month compares to the month where the absolute most energy was used in the entire year.
For Abu Dhabi, the summer months naturally have the highest ratios, indicating that the total energy consumed is closest to that annual peak during that time.
Okay.
The winter months show significantly lower ratios, highlighting the reduced overall energy use compared to that summer peak.
Okay, so really the summer months are the ones to watch out for.
Exactly.
And what about the other regions, the Al Ain and the Al Dhafra regions and the system as a whole? Do we see a similar pattern there?
Yes, the general trend holds across all regions. The summer months consistently show the highest ratios of monthly energy demand to the annual peak energy demand, underscoring that the largest amounts of energy are consumed during the hottest part of the year. The winter months exhibit the lowest ratios, reflecting lower overall consumption relative to that summer peak. This consistency across regions again emphasizes the strong influence of climate on energy consumption patterns throughout the emirate.
Okay, great. So we've looked at the electricity demand. We've looked at the consumption to wrap up the electricity portion of this deep dive. Let's look at the electricity generation. The report gives us the annual electricity generation in gross gigawatt hours for 2015 to 2019, and this is broken down by station, which were the main power stations that were generating electricity during that period.
Yeah, so examining the data, you can see that the Tawila power stations consistently generated a very significant portion of the total electricity. The Shuwei Hat and Murpha power stations were also major contributors to the overall generation capacity during those years.
Okay.
The report gives the specific gigawatt-hour figures for each station, allowing for a detailed understanding of the generation mix and the relative importance of different power plants
Right.
in meeting Abu Dhabi's electricity needs.
Well, that's a really nice detailed look
Cool.
at how that side of the equation works well. That brings us to the end of our look at the electricity sector based on this 2019 EWEC statistical report, and I think we covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, we really did. And it provides a really valuable perspective on the dynamics of Abu Dhabi's electricity sector at that time.
Yeah, I think so too. We saw the growth in both peak and minimum demands. We saw the clear seasonal patterns of energy consumption driven by the climate, and we saw the crucial role played by those different power generation facilities in meeting those needs.
Absolutely. And, if we connect this back to you, the listener, this data isn't just abstract numbers. It reflects the ongoing growth and development of Abu Dhabi and the increasing need for power to support that progress.
Right.
And understanding these trends is essential for planning future energy strategies and the necessary infrastructure investments.
Well said. And I think it begs the question, considering the trends in electricity demand that we've seen and the existing infrastructure in place, what future energy sources do you think will be most crucial for Abu Dhabi in the years to come?
Yeah, that's a great question. The data we've looked at from 2019 provides a crucial benchmark. And it's fascinating to think about how the energy landscape has continued to evolve since then
Right.
and what innovative solutions might be on the horizon.
A lot to consider.
Yeah.
Well, now let's turn our attention to another essential resource that's highlighted in this report, and that is water. And just as we looked at the demand and production of electricity, let's dive into the water statistics from 2019 and see what we can glean from that. That the report gives us a lot of detailed information on water demand across the different regions of Abu Dhabi. What were some of the overarching trends in water consumption that jumped out at you?
So you're looking at the water statistics similar to electricity. The report indicates a general trend of increasing water demand
Okay.
across the Abu Dhabi, Al-Ain, and Al-Dhafra regions. Factors such as population growth, agricultural activities, and industrial use all contribute to this rising demand. The report breaks down the total water withdrawn and the potable water supplied, giving a comprehensive overview of the water resources management in the Emirate.
And did the report give us a feel for where that water was coming from in 2019?
Yes, so the report details the water production by source desalination was a primary source of potable water, given the arid climate. The report would have provided figures on the capacity and output of the various desalination plants. Additionally, it would have included data on the extraction and use of groundwater resources for different purposes, including agriculture. Understanding this mix of sources is crucial for assessing the sustainability of Abu Dhabi's water supply.
Right. And did we see seasonal patterns in water demand similar to what we saw on the electricity side with the impact of the summer heat?
Absolutely. The report likely shows seasonal variations in water demand as well, although the drivers might be slightly different from electricity.
Okay.
Increased water usage for irrigation during drier periods and potentially higher domestic consumption during hotter months could contribute to peaks in demand. The report would present monthly figures to illustrate these trends.
Okay, great. And were there any insights in the report on the efficiency of water usage or any data on water losses in the network?
While the 2019 statistical report primarily focuses on demand and production, it might touch upon aspects related to efficiency indirectly through the comparison of water withdrawn versus water supplied as potable water.
Okay.
Significant discrepancies could hint at potential losses in the system. More detailed analysis of water network efficiency might be found in other dedicated reports.
Right.
But this statistical overview provides a baseline understanding of the overall water balance.
Right. So taking both electricity and the water together, the 2019 EWEC statistical report paints a picture of growing demand for both essential resources in Abu Dhabi, and it highlights the seasonal influences and particularly the impact of the summer heat on electricity consumption.
Exactly. And by providing this detailed data, EWC enables informed decision-making regarding future infrastructure development, energy diversification, and sustainable resource management.
Right.
The report serves as a vital tool for understanding the trends and challenges in Abu Dhabi's utility sector.
Okay, well, considering these insights from the 2019 data on both electricity and water, what kind of broader implications do you see for the future sustainability of Abu Dhabi's resources?
Yeah, it raises critical questions about the balance between economic growth and resource conservation.
Yeah.
The trends highlighted in the 2019 report underscore the ongoing need for innovation in water desalination technologies, the development of renewable energy sources to power those processes, and the implementation of policies that promote efficient resource consumption across all sectors.
Yeah, those are some really important considerations. Well,
Well,
thank you for guiding us through this this deep dive into the 2019 EWEC statistical report. I thought it was very informative.
my pleasure. It's been great to revisit this data.
Yeah, and thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been fascinating to get this granular look at this critical sector, and I think we've all learned a lot.
I agree.
Great. Well, we'll see you next time.